The alarm. The command center was quiet, too quiet. Captain Lucas Daniels stared at the glowing screens in front of him. Everything looked normal. The daily data, routine scans, and communication reports all seemed calm. But something felt off. The silence was broken by a sudden beep, then another. The signal was coming from deep space, far beyond the Earth's orbit. It wasn't a usual communication. The frequency was strange. The type of signal, unfamiliar. "What's that?" Captain Daniels muttered to himself, leaning forward. His hand hovered over the control panel. The quiet hum of the room filled his ears as he clicked a few buttons, pulling up the mysterious signal on the main screen. "Unidentified transmission, sir," a voice said from behind him. It was Lieutenant Sarah Wallace, his trusted second-in-command. She was standing by the communication station, her eyes wide with concern. "Can you decode it?" Daniels asked, his voice calm, but with a hint of urgency. "I'm trying, Captain, but it's like nothing we've ever seen before," Wallace replied. She worked quickly, her fingers dancing over the controls, but the message remained scrambled. The odd symbols flickered across the screen, faster than she could interpret them. Daniels frowned, his mind racing. The transmission was coming from beyond the outer colonies, space that humanity hadn't explored in years. The system was supposed to be uninhabited, filled only with empty planets and scattered debris. But now, something, or someone, was out there. "Send the coordinates to the fleet. We need to check this out," Daniels ordered. Wallace nodded and sent the information to the nearby Earth Defense Force ships. They were scattered across various points of Earth's orbit, keeping an eye on possible threats, but nothing had ever seemed threatening before. They were prepared for alien life, for encounters with different species. But this was something else. As Daniels watched the data pour in, his mind raced. He had been in command long enough to know that when something was this strange, it was rarely good. Something was coming, and it wasn't human. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. The tension in the room thickened, everyone waiting for answers that wouldn't come. Daniels was about to speak again when another beep sounded, this time louder and more urgent. "Captain, the signal is getting stronger. It's coming closer," Wallace shouted. She spun around, her face pale. "It's not just a transmission. It's a ship, and it's heading straight for Earth." Daniels' eyes widened. "How fast is it moving?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "At least 3 times the speed of our fastest ship," Wallace replied, glancing at the readouts. "At this rate, it'll be within Earth's orbit in less than 48 hours. The crew fell into a stunned silence. 48 hours. That wasn't enough time to prepare, especially not for something that was faster and more advanced than anything they had ever seen. "Alert the fleet. Prepare for immediate action," Daniels ordered, his voice sharp. He looked at his second-in-command, his mind working quickly. "We need to get eyes on this ship. Send out every reconnaissance drone we have." Wallace didn't hesitate. She quickly sent commands to the drone units stationed across Earth's orbit. The fleet was on high alert, and preparations for battle began. Daniels walked over to the large map of Earth's defenses, his eyes scanning the grid. Satellites, fleet positions, shielding systems. They had been ready for an alien invasion before. Humanity had always been cautious, but nothing had ever come close to this. He had to be ready. The fate of Earth depended on it. A few moments later, a young officer approached Daniels. His face was pale, eyes wide with panic. "Captain," he said, his voice shaking. "The ship, it's massive. Our drones are sending back data. It's not just a warship. It's a floating city." "A city," Daniels repeated, his heart pounding. He could feel the weight of the situation settling in his chest. A city-sized ship. What kind of enemy were they facing? "It's enormous, Captain. We're talking kilometers across," the officer continued. "And it's armed to the teeth. This isn't just a scouting vessel. This is a full-scale invasion force." Daniel swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. His eyes flicked back to Wallace, who was watching the screens with the same mixture of fear and determination. She didn't need to say anything. The message was clear. Earth was about to face a threat unlike anything it had ever known. The lights above them flickered, and a loud alarm suddenly blared throughout the command center. The sound was deafening, a sharp reminder of the reality they now faced. Evacuate the lower levels. Prepare for defense, Daniel shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. All available pilots, get to your stations. This is not a drill. The crew sprang into action, moving quickly to execute their orders. There was no time to waste. The clock was ticking down. They had less than 48 hours. But as Daniel stood at the center of the command room, his gaze never leaving the screen, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The real battle hadn't even started yet. A glimpse of the enemy. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Military ships scrambled into position, their engines roaring as they launched from Earth's orbit. In the command center, Captain Daniels watched with a tense, unwavering focus as the enemy warship continued its relentless approach. His mind was a whirlwind of calculations and strategies, but the truth was, they were up against something far beyond their understanding. On the main screen, the large image of the enemy ship flickered. Drones had managed to get closer, but the warship's energy shields were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Each time they tried to get a better look, the shields pushed the drones back with a force so powerful it seemed like a wall of invisible energy. Then, something changed. The enemy warship emitted a pulse, a wave of energy so strong that it caused a ripple across space itself. It wasn't just a warning shot. It was a clear message. Stay away. Lieutenant Wallace was the first to notice the anomaly. Captain, look at the sensors. Something's happening. The warship, it's revealing itself, she said, pointing at the screen. It's like it's changing. Daniel squinted at the display. For a moment, the warship seemed to vanish, its cloaking technology activating. The human fleet scanners were useless, unable to detect it anymore. But then, right before their eyes, the warship reappeared, an enormous angular silhouette, cloaked in a haze of energy. The size of it was overwhelming. It wasn't just large, it was a city in space, vast and awe-inspiring, yet terrifying in its sheer scale. The enemy vessel slowly emerged from its cloak, as if testing the humans. Its massive surface was covered in strange markings, intricate designs that didn't make sense. They seemed to shift and change, almost alive, as if the ship itself was a living being. It was beyond human comprehension. The humans could only watch in disbelief as the sheer power of the ship radiated outward, its dark metal surface glinting ominously under the dim light of distant stars. We need more information, Daniels muttered to himself. He tapped a few commands into his console, sending a message to one of the more advanced drone units. Get closer. Record everything. I don't care if it's risky. Wallace's fingers flew over the keyboard, trying to gain control over the scattered data. The ships had started to move into position, their weapons primed, but Daniels knew it would be foolish to act until they had more knowledge. The humans were still in the dark. The enemy ship was too powerful, too unknown. Every move they made had to be precise. At that moment, a voice echoed over the intercom, pulling Daniels from his thoughts. Captain, we've lost contact with Drone Alpha. It was destroyed. Just vanished. The voice was a young officer, clearly shaken by the news. Daniel's heart sank. The drones were their best chance to gather intel, and losing one so easily meant they were dealing with technology that could wipe them out in an instant. Send in the secondary drones, Daniels ordered, his tone hardening. We can't let them take us by surprise. But it was already too late. The warship moved again, this time at an unnerving speed. Its cloaking mechanism flickered once more, and then, without warning, it shot forward, faster than anything they had ever seen. In mere seconds, it was directly within Earth's orbit. There was no time to prepare. "We can't stop it." "Not like this," Wallace said, her voice full of disbelief. The fleet commanders scrambled, each of them adjusting their position and hoping to land a successful strike. Daniels could feel the tension thick in the air. They were outmatched, but they couldn't back down now. The fate of Earth hung in the balance. Just then, a new signal appeared on the screen. It wasn't coming from the warship, but from somewhere deep within it. A sharp, cold message cut through the static. "Humans." The voice was clear, chilling, and metallic. It had no emotion, no warmth, just cold, calculating command. "We see you." The crew fell silent. The implications of those words hung heavily in the room. The warship knew they were there. It was toying with them, watching, waiting. "We need to prepare for battle," Daniels said, trying to hold back the fear creeping into his voice. "Activate all defense systems. All ships are to move into defensive positions immediately." Just as they reached the threshold of the core chamber, the lights in the corridor dimmed, and the walls hummed with a menacing resonance. The ship was shifting. The door in front of them slid open, revealing the heart of the warship, the core. It was massive, a swirling sphere of energy that filled the chamber with its blinding glow. And there, standing in the center of the room, was a figure. It wasn't human. A tall, angular creature stood before them, its body made of shifting, dark metal plates, seemingly woven together by glowing, pulsating energy. Its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, were empty voids, reflecting no emotion, only the cold stare of a machine. "We've been expecting you." The voice spoke again, this time from the figure itself, its tone flat and unnatural. "Your efforts are futile." The team froze. The figure was a sentinel, a living embodiment of the warship's will. It was clear now that the ship wasn't just a vessel, it was alive. Its intelligence, its very being, had been watching them the entire time. And now it was protecting its heart. Without hesitation, Sergeant Lawson raised her rifle, firing a series of high-powered rounds at the sentinel. But the bullets bounced off its metal body with no effect. The sentinel didn't move. It simply stared at them, waiting. Turner cursed under his breath. "We can't destroy it. The energy shield is too strong. We need to disable its power source first." Garrett's mind raced. The core was the key. If they didn't destroy it, the ship would keep regenerating, its defenses would stay active, and their efforts would be wasted. "Lawson, keep it distracted," Garrett ordered. "We'll disable the core. Move." The team moved quickly. Lawson fired again, but the sentinel didn't react. It just watched as Garrett and Turner sprinted to the base of the energy core, their only hope resting on a single fragile plan. The ship's energy was coming from the core. It was the ship's heart and soul. If they could disable it, even for a short time, it would cripple the warship long enough for their fleet to strike. "Turner, can you bypass the core's security systems?" Garrett asked, his voice filled with urgency. "I can try." Turner shouted back, quickly accessing a series of wires and conduits around the base of the core. The wires were glowing, alive with energy. It was like trying to defuse a bomb. One wrong move, and they'd all be vaporized. Garrett moved to the console, assisting Turner in navigating the intricate systems. Every second felt like an eternity. The sentinel continued to stand motionless, its glowing eyes following their every move. The air in the chamber felt heavy, and the ground beneath them vibrated as the core's power surged. Suddenly, Turner looked up, his face grim. "I'm in, but we don't have much time. If we don't overload the core now, it'll trigger a defensive pulse, and we'll be locked out." "Do it," Garrett ordered. With a final swipe of his hand, Turner completed the sequence. Sparks flew from the console as the core's power fluctuated, the glow of the sphere dimming for a brief moment. The energy in the room flickered. For one brief, glorious moment, The warship's energy shields deactivated. But then, the Sentinel moved. It surged forward with terrifying speed, its metal limbs extending like weapons. It lashed out, knocking Garrett aside, sending him crashing to the floor. The others fought back, but the Sentinel was too strong, too fast. Turner was still at the console, desperately trying to complete the final sequence. "Come on," he shouted, his fingers moving faster than ever. Garrett struggled to stand, his head spinning. "Turner, hurry," he shouted, as the Sentinel turned toward him, its glowing voids now filled with an unmistakable sense of purpose. The core flickered once more. Then, the final overload was initiated. A blinding flash of light erupted from the core, followed by a deafening roar. The Sentinel screamed, its body jerking violently as the power from the core surged outward, rippling through the ship. And then, the ship shuddered. The energy shields were gone. The warship was vulnerable. "We did it," Garrett shouted, adrenaline coursing through him as he staggered to his feet. But their victory came with a price. The Sentinel was not defeated, only disabled temporarily, its body crumpling to the ground. "We're out of time," Turner said, glancing at the flickering systems around them. "The warship is already rebooting its systems. We need to get out now." With the core destabilized, the warship was temporarily powerless. The team had no choice but to flee before its self-repair systems could fully activate. They ran, their hearts pounding, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the corridors. He turned back to Wallace, his mind racing. "We'll need to make sure that the decoy fleet hits them hard enough to pull their attention. The moment they go after the fleet, we'll send in the strike team. But we won't have a lot of time," Wallace warned. "Once we engage, we'll be on a timer. The enemy warship won't let us get close for long." "We won't need long," Daniel said. "Once the strike team is inside, they'll sabotage their core. We disable their energy supply, and the warship will lose power. It's our best shot." The room fell silent for a moment. The plan was risky, almost too risky, but it was the only one they had. There was no other choice. If they didn't act now, Earth would be gone in a matter of hours. Daniels looked out over his crew. He could see the worry on their faces, but also the resolve. They were ready. They had no choice but to fight. "All right," Daniels said, his voice firm. "We don't have much time. Let's get this plan into motion. No mistakes. We go in, hit them hard, and we do it together. Earth is depending on us." As the room came alive with preparations, Daniel's mind was still focused on the mission. They had a slim chance of success, but as he looked at the faces of the people around him, he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Humanity had faced impossible odds before and won. They could do it again. He took one last look at the massive warship on the screen. Its dark presence loomed over them all, but in that moment, Daniels knew one thing. The humans would not go down without a fight. They would show the invaders the true power of humanity, its resilience, its unity, and its unyielding spirit. The counterattack. The countdown to action was relentless. The fleet was ready, and the clock was ticking. Captain Daniels stood before the massive battle map in the command center, his mind racing through the complex plan they had devised. The decoy fleet was already in position, moving in a pattern designed to draw the attention of the enemy warship. Their strike team, a small group of Earth's best soldiers, was preparing for a mission that could very well be their last. "Everything's in place, Captain," Lieutenant Wallace said, her voice steady but carrying an edge of anxiety. "The decoy fleet is in motion. The enemy has taken the bait. They're focusing their weapons on it." Daniels nodded. "Good. It's time for our team to move." As he spoke, the strike team assembled around a table. They were the best of the best. Lieutenant Tom Garrett, the experienced commander, Sergeant Mia Lawson, a weapons expert, Corporal Evan Turner, the tech genius, and 2 more soldiers, skilled in combat and infiltration. They were about to do something no one had ever attempted: enter a warship the size of a small moon, unnoticed, and sabotage it from the inside. Their mission was simple: infiltrate the enemy vessel, find its power core, and destroy it. But that simplicity masked the true danger. The enemy ship had advanced cloaking technology and shield systems beyond anything Earth could combat, and their force of soldiers was minuscule compared to the entire enemy warship. "Are you sure the tech will work?" Sergeant Lawson asked, glancing at Corporal Turner, who was holding a small device in his hands. Turner gave her a tight-lipped smile. "I've tested it. It should create a temporary cloaking field around us, long enough to get inside. But we're talking minutes, not hours. Once we're inside, we'll need to move fast." Garrett stepped forward. His eyes were focused, calculating. "Let's make sure we don't waste time. We got one shot at this." Daniels looked at them all, the weight of their lives pressing down on him. "You're Earth's last hope. Get in, get to the core, and get out. No mistakes." With that, the team moved to the transport bay. The moment was tense. Each person knew this could be the last time they saw Earth. As they boarded their stealth shuttle, Turner activated the cloaking device, and the small vessel shimmered, vanishing from the radar. They were invisible to the enemy now, hidden within the vast emptiness of space. Outside, the decoy fleet engaged the enemy. A series of controlled blasts and strategic maneuvers distracted the warship, causing it to fire its massive energy weapons at the incoming fleet. The sound of explosions echoed through space as the decoy ships took hit after hit, but the real mission was unfolding silently, under the radar. As the shuttle approached the enemy warship, the crew members could see its true size up close. It was like nothing they had ever encountered: a dark, jagged mass of metal and energy. The cloaking device held for now, but the team knew they didn't have long. Coming up on the outer hull, Turner whispered, his fingers hovering over the controls. "I'm activating the breaching charge." The shuttle moved closer to a vulnerable section of the warship, a small seam where the enemy hadn't seemed to reinforce the hull as heavily. With a muffled thud, the breaching charge exploded, creating a small opening just big enough for the shuttle to slip inside. "Entering the warship," Garrett said, his voice low. The team held their breath as the shuttle passed through the opening and into the interior of the massive vessel. The noise of the battle outside faded as they entered the warship's cold, dark interior. Inside, the ship was eerily silent. The walls were dark, smooth, and seemingly alive, pulsating with energy. The team stepped out of the shuttle, their boots making soft thuds on the alien metal floor. Their cloaking tech still held, for now. But the further they went, the more they felt the oppressive weight of the warship's presence. "Stay close," Garrett ordered, his voice a quiet command. "We don't know how much longer this tech will hold. Let's get to the core." They moved quickly, their eyes darting around. The ship was massive, but the corridors were oddly empty. There were no signs of crew, no visible threat. It almost felt like the ship itself was watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. Every turn they took felt like a trap, every shadow a potential enemy. Turner worked furiously on his device, hacking into the ship's systems to guide them toward the core. "We're getting close, but this ship has more security than I expected. I'm bypassing as much as I can, but we need to hurry." Suddenly, a low hum reverberated through the walls. The ship had detected something, perhaps the breach, perhaps the disruption of their systems. The team's cloaking field flickered. The moment they were spotted, it would be over. "Move. Now," Garrett shouted. The team sprinted through the corridors, the sounds of footsteps echoing loudly in the silence. They were close, so close to their target. But the ship's defense system had already started to react. Steel doors slammed shut in their path. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, as if the ship was coming alive to stop them. "Almost there," Turner shouted, his voice strained. He was sweating, his fingers shaking as he hacked into the final system that would unlock the pathway to the core. With a final beep, the door in front of them opened, revealing a massive chamber at the heart of the warship. The core, an enormous, glowing sphere, floated in the center, surrounded by a ring of alien technology. The energy it radiated was intense, almost blinding. But before they could step forward, the walls around them shuddered, and an eerie voice echoed through the chamber. Intruders. The voice was cold, filled with contempt. The ship knew they were there, and it wasn't going to let them leave. The human strategy. The eerie voice that had reverberated through the ship's metallic walls echoed in the minds of the strike team. Intruders. The cold, emotionless command sent a wave of tension through the air. The warship was aware of their presence. The team had been spotted. "Take cover," Garrett shouted, instinctively pushing the team into a dark alcove. The chamber ahead, with its massive, glowing energy core, stood just beyond a thick, pulsating wall. The walls themselves seemed to shudder with energy, the ship almost breathing around them. But the team couldn't stop. They had come too far. Garrett took a deep breath, suppressing his fear. The ship's voice wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. And now, it was waiting for them to make a mistake. They had no more time to waste. "Turner, can you disrupt the ship's communications? We need to block any reinforcements from reaching us," Garrett asked, his voice steady despite the situation. He turned to the young corporal, who was working rapidly to bypass the security systems. "I'm on it," Turner replied, his fingers moving at lightning speed over the device strapped to his wrist. "I can jam their internal communications for a few minutes, but after that, we'll have no cover. We need to act fast." Garrett nodded. The team had trained for moments like this, pressured, isolated, and outgunned. But this was no ordinary mission. The enemy was intelligent, relentless, and now it was aware of them. "We move in," Garrett ordered. "We destroy that core, and we leave. No second chances." The team stepped forward, moving quickly yet cautiously. The core chamber loomed in front of them, its energy so powerful that the air itself seemed to crackle. Every step they took felt like 1,000 eyes were on them, even though the chamber was still empty. The ship seemed to pulse with anticipation. "I've been running the simulations on the core, General," Dr. Scott continued. "It's worse than I thought. The ship's energy is not just sustainable, it's growing. The power we've harnessed is sentient, almost. It's reacting to us, adapting to the ship's systems. If we don't find a way to sever that connection soon, it could take control of the ship entirely." Monroe's eyes widened as she processed the scientist's words. "You mean the ship is evolving?" Dr. Scott nodded. "Yes, the core's energy is learning from its surroundings. It's becoming something we never intended it to be, something far more powerful than even the aliens we faced." A cold silence filled the room. Carter's heart sank as she considered the implications. They had thought the soulless devourer was humanity's answer to the alien threat, but now it seemed to be something more, a living entity with its own will. It had already consumed the energy of an entire star. What would it do next? "We need to isolate the core and shut it down completely," Carter said, her voice firm. "If it's evolving, we need to contain it before it gets out of hand." Dr. Scott hesitated. "That's the problem, Colonel. The core is now linked to every system on the ship. Trying to shut it down will destabilize everything. We have to completely rewire the systems to isolate the core's energy, but that could take days, maybe longer. And we don't have that long," Carter added, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "The longer we wait, the more likely it is the soulless devourer will turn on us. It's adapting faster than we can keep up." Just then, a sudden, strange vibration coursed through the ship. The crew froze, exchanging worried glances. The energy core wasn't just reacting, it was actively communicating. The faint hum they'd grown accustomed to had become a constant, low-pitched pulse, almost like a heartbeat. "General," Monroe said, her voice trembling, It's not just adapting. It's calling to something. Before Carter could respond, the ship's exterior lights flickered, and the view screen blinked on. The stars outside seemed to ripple, shifting as though the fabric of space itself was warping. The soulless devourer wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a bridge to something greater, something beyond human understanding. The pulse intensified, and then, just as suddenly as it had started, the screen shifted to show a new formation of ships. Massive, uncountable, and darker than the night sky itself. The soulless devourer had attracted the attention of something far beyond the alien fleet they had just destroyed. "Are those more ships?" Monroe asked, her voice thick with disbelief. Carter stepped forward, staring at the screen in shock. "No, these aren't ships. This is an entire civilization. The core, whatever it's become, is reaching out, and it's calling them here." The room fell into stunned silence. The soulless devourer had done more than just alter the course of the war. It had opened a doorway to an entirely new level of conflict, a conflict they were not prepared for. "Prepare for impact," Carter shouted, her voice cutting through the panic that began to spread. "We're about to face something far greater than we've ever imagined. The real war is just beginning." The aftermath and revelation. The atmosphere on the soulless devourer was thick with anxiety. The crew stood in stunned silence as the massive unknown fleet loomed closer. The once calm stars outside the bridge windows had been replaced with dark shadows, and the pulse from the core had intensified to a steady, unrelenting rhythm. It was as if the ship had awakened something older, something far more powerful than the crew could have ever imagined. General Carter paced across the bridge, trying to keep her thoughts in order. This wasn't supposed to happen. They had used the soulless devourer as their last hope to defend Earth, not to open the door to an entirely new enemy. The enemy they had destroyed, the one that had first threatened Earth, was nothing compared to what was coming. "We need answers," Carter muttered under her breath, turning back to face the view screen. Where did this fleet come from? And what exactly did the ship awaken? Lieutenant Monroe's voice broke through her thoughts. "General, we're receiving an unknown signal. It's not like anything we've encountered before." The screen blinked, and a strange, ghostly image appeared. An alien figure, tall and covered in intricate armor that shimmered like liquid metal. Its face was hidden behind a translucent mask, and its eyes glowed with a faint, unnatural light. The creature's presence felt ancient, powerful, and completely alien. The figure's voice, when it came, was deep and resonant, vibrating through the very air of the bridge. "Humanity has awakened the devourer. It is no longer your weapon. It is ours." Carter's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean?" she demanded. "Who are you?" The turning point. The team's hearts raced as they sprinted down the corridors of the enemy warship. The walls seemed to pulse with anger, the ship reacting to the disruption they had caused. The blinding flash from the core's overload had bought them precious seconds, but now the warship was coming back online. The hum of the power systems slowly returned, growing louder and louder until it was deafening. "Move," Garrett barked, his voice sharp as he pushed the team forward. Behind them, the Sentinel, still disoriented but regaining its strength, was beginning to stir. It wouldn't be down for long. Turner glanced over his shoulder, his eyes wide with fear. "The core's destabilizing faster than I thought. If we don't get out before it resets, we're going to be caught in the explosion." "We'll make it," Garrett said, his voice tense but resolute. He had led his team through impossible situations before, but this was different. The ship was alive, sentient, and it had just learned how dangerous humans could be. There would be no more chances. If they didn't escape, the ship would swallow them whole. The corridors seemed endless as they ran, twisting and turning, each corner a new uncertainty. The ship's layout was a maze, its interior designed to confuse and trap intruders. The strike team had studied the blueprints, but nothing had prepared them for the sheer size of the warship or the labyrinthine passages that felt as if they were alive, constantly shifting. Suddenly, a shriek of metal filled the air. The sentinel had found them. Garrett turned around just in time to see the towering figure charging toward them, its limbs a blur of motion. It was faster than anything they'd seen, and it wasn't slowing down. As it moved, the walls themselves seemed to bend, almost as if the ship was helping it, guiding it to their location. "Scatter," Garrett shouted. The team broke apart, sprinting in different directions as the sentinel's long metal arms sliced through the air, narrowly missing them. Lawson fired again, but her shots bounced off the sentinel's reinforced armor. The beast's empty eyes locked onto her, its glowing voids narrowing as it prepared to strike. "Lawson, move," Garrett yelled. But before Lawson could react, the ship's alarms blared, and the walls shuddered again. The floor beneath them cracked open, revealing a massive mechanical arm that shot up from the ground, aimed directly at the team. It was like something out of a nightmare, gigantic, built with the same dark, pulsating metal as the rest of the ship. "Get down," Turner shouted, pulling Lawson out of the way just as the arm swung past them, sending debris flying in all directions. The arm came down again, smashing the floor just inches from their feet. They were trapped. The warship had responded to their infiltration, and now it was closing in. "We need to take out the sentinel now, or we're dead," Lawson shouted, trying to steady her weapon. Garrett's mind raced as he assessed their options. They were surrounded. The ship's response was coordinated, intelligent. It wasn't just one enemy they were facing. It was the entire warship, all its systems working against them. The ship had learned their tactics, and it was adapting faster than they could react. "Turner, get to the panel," Garrett shouted. "You've got to disable the warship's automated defense systems. It's the only way we can get out of here." Turner nodded and bolted toward a nearby control panel, fingers flying over the interface. The alarms blared louder now, echoing through the chamber. He could hear the mechanical arm retracting, ready to strike again. Every second mattered. The sentinel was closing in on Garrett, but just as it lunged forward, Garrett threw a small grenade at its feet. The explosion didn't damage the sentinel directly, but it sent a shockwave through the room, knocking the creature off balance. Garrett used the opportunity to rush past it, his rifle raised. "Keep moving," he shouted to his team. "Get to the control panel." Lawson and Turner scrambled toward the console. The mechanical arm swung again, but Turner had just enough time to input a command. Sparks flew as the system shorted out, and with a final flicker, the deadly defense mechanisms powered down. The team was temporarily safe, but only for a moment. "The core's going critical," Turner said, eyes wide with fear. "We've got less than 5 minutes before this place goes up. We need to get to the shuttle. Now." The team ran, hearts pounding, but the warship wasn't finished. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the passageways twisted, trying to block their exit. The ship was alive, trying to keep them from escaping, but the humans had learned its secrets, and now it was fighting for its life. As they reached the shuttle bay, they saw the transport vessel waiting for them, the doors still open. But just as they stepped forward, another metallic screech rang through the air. The sentinel had followed them. It was a final, desperate stand. The team had fought their way through hell and back, but the sentinel was the ship's last line of defense. The doorway to the shuttle was within reach, but the sentinel was in their path, its glowing eyes filled with hatred. "You're not leaving," the voice echoed again, chillingly cold. Garrett raised his rifle, determined. "We don't need to leave the way we came." He tossed a grenade at the sentinel's feet, the blast powerful enough to knock it back. But the creature was still standing. It was relentless. It wouldn't stop until they were all dead. "Run," Garrett shouted. Now, with one final push, the team sprinted toward the shuttle, the sentinel closing in behind them. The doors were closing, but Turner wasn't inside yet. He was still at the control panel, working frantically to start the shuttle's engines. The shuttle's engines roared to life, but just as the door was closing, the sentinel reached out, its hand slamming against the door with a force that shook the shuttle. For a terrifying moment, Garrett thought the creature would tear through the metal and end their mission right then and there. But the door shut, and the shuttle rocketed into space. The team was free. For now. But as the warship, once a formidable foe, shuddered and exploded in the distance, the truth was clear. This fight was far from over. The ship might be gone, but the war was only beginning. The victory. The shuttle blasted through space, the hum of the engines deafening in the confined space. The crew was silent, their bodies still shaking from the intense fight and the near-death experience they'd just survived. As they shot away from the now distant explosion of the warship, the reality of their victory began to settle in. Earth was safe, for now. Garrett's eyes were glued to the view screen, watching as the warship crumbled into a massive ball of fire and debris. The shockwaves rippled through the vacuum of space, the fragments scattering like shattered glass. It was over. The warship, the alien threat that had loomed over them for days, had been defeated. But Garrett couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. This was only one battle. The war was far from over. Garrett, Lawson's voice broke through his thoughts. What now? The captain turned to face her, his expression hardening. Now we go back. We report to command. But we're not done. This victory, while important, was just the beginning. We've seen the enemy's capabilities. There's more out there. And they know we're here. Lawson nodded slowly, understanding. The warship they'd destroyed was only one of many, and they had no idea how far-reaching this alien force truly was. They had dealt a devastating blow, but there were whispers of more fleets, of a larger, more dangerous empire in the stars. Turner looked up from his console, his fingers still shaking as he worked through the shuttle systems. I've managed to pull some data from the warship's core before we left. The enemy, they were preparing something. They were transmitting coordinates, and I think they were sending out a distress signal. It's possible they have reinforcements coming. That thought settled heavily in the air, thick with dread. The team had just barely survived, and now they were learning the full extent of what they had just faced. We've got to warn Earth, Garrett said, voice grim. We need to be ready. The shuttle flew through space, making its way back to Earth's orbit. As the blue planet slowly came into view, a sense of relief washed over the team. They had done it. They had defeated an enemy force that outmatched them at every turn. But Earth's victory felt fragile now, as though it could be undone at any moment. When the shuttle finally docked at the military station, the team disembarked, their faces exhausted but proud. Commanding officers greeted them, but there was no time for celebration. The war was still out there, waiting for them. As Garrett entered the briefing room, he was met with the stern faces of Earth's top military leaders. He stood tall, his mind still processing everything they had been through. Captain Garrett, General Harris said, voice low but commanding, you and your team performed above and beyond the call of duty. You've given humanity a fighting chance, but we need to talk about what comes next. Garrett didn't hesitate. We've won this battle, but the enemy is far from finished. They were preparing reinforcements. They were sending out a distress signal. We need to prepare for what's coming. We need to get the fleet ready for a full-scale war. General Harris was silent for a moment, his gaze unwavering. We'll need to act fast. But first, we need to study the data you brought back. If this enemy is as dangerous as you say, we need to understand everything we can about them. It's not just about fighting. We need to know how to beat them. Turner stepped forward, holding up a tablet. We've already started analyzing their data. There are weapons on that ship, weapons unlike anything we've ever seen. And the technology, it's centuries ahead of ours. I don't care how advanced their tech is, Lawson said, her voice sharp. We've faced impossible odds before, and we're still here. We'll figure out how to fight back. We just need time. Garrett nodded, We can't let our guard down. We need to keep moving, keep strategizing. The enemy has seen our strength, but they've also seen our weaknesses. They'll be back." The general nodded, a grim expression on his face. "Agreed. But for now, we'll take this victory, and we'll prepare for what comes next." As Garrett looked out over the command room, he couldn't help but think about the message the enemy had sent before the battle had even started. The hunt begins. The war was far from over,